Hi guys, so what we're going to try and be doing today and over the next few days is I'm going to try and send recordings each day, maybe around half an hour, to move on in the Gemara to advance where we are so we can make the Siyum by Purim. We're on the top of Tet Vav Amud Aleph. Maybe I will share screen and let you see the daf. Let me just find that. I'm going to pause it a second and find it. I'm sharing screen. So we are at the top of the page, Tet Vav Amud Aleph, and we're dealing with the descent of Rachav. She had 8 descents of Kohanim and Nevi'im, and she had another Nevi'ah, a female prophetess, as it's known in English. Excuse me. And we're dealing with this because we're trying to understand how we actually know the Nevi'im. So it says, Bishlei ma'inuhu mifarshe, Ela avatayu minalan. We know Yirmiyahu and Hanamel are Nevi'im. That's not the issue. And we know also that Baruch and Sariah are also, we have 4 here. But we said earlier that their fathers were also Nevi'im. And we don't know how they are. I mean, we have to have a source for it. As it says, right, so we don't know how to have a source for Neriah, who's the father of Baruch. We don't have a source for Machasiah, who is the father of Sariah. We don't have a source for Chilkiah, the father of Yirmiyah. And we don't have a source for Shalom, the father of Hanamel. So Gemara asks, Minalan Kedu'ula. We know that they were Nevi'im from Ula. Da'ama Ula, as Ula would say, Kol Makom Sheshmo V'Shem Aviv B'Nevi'ut B'Yadua Shu Navi Ben Navi. Shmo V'Lo Shem Aviv B'Yadua Shu Navi V'Lo Ben Navi. Shmo V'Shem Iro Mefurash B'Yadua Shu Mota'ir. Shmo V'Lo Shem Iro B'Yadua Shu Mi'Yerushalayim. Okay, so Ula teaches this. When it talks about a Navi and is referring to his prophecy, and it says his name and his father's name, from this we know that he and his father are both Nevi'im. And if, when referring to Nevuah, it doesn't say the father's name, from this we know the father of the Navi was not a Navi. So too, if it says explicitly his name and the name of his city, we know he's for sure from that place. If, however, it doesn't say where he's from, we know that he is from Yerushalayim. B'matnita in the Braita, Tana kol shma'asav u'ma'asav stumim u'foret lecha k'tuv b'echad me'en l'shevach k'gon devar Hashem asher haya el Tzfania ben Kushi ben Gedalia b'yadua shu ben Tzadik shu Tzadik ben Tzadik v'chol shepiret lecha hakatuv b'echad me'en l'gnai gon v'ayi b'chodesh hashvi ba'yishmael ben Natanya ben Elishama b'yadua shu Rasha ben Rasha. So we saw in the Braita that anytime where it doesn't say if someone's actions are good or not, and then in one pasuk it mentions the shvach, and then in one of them it says explicitly that someone is righteous. Like we say with regards to the pasuk in Tzfania, Dvar Hashem asher haya el Tzfania ben Kushi ben Gedalia. The word of Hashem was to Tzfania, the son of Kushi, the son of Gedalia, and we know that Tzfania was Navi. We know that Kushi and Gedalia were also Tzadikim. Okay. Because it says specifically about them. Now this pasuk, 1 second, is Tzfania, the opening of Tzfania, the beginning of Tzfania, and it says they were righteous people, or it denotes them in a specific way, and therefore we know the Tzadikim, even though we didn't know beforehand. And then when it says specifically in one place that someone did something bad, we know his parents also did something bad. If it uses the parents' names as well. And this was we're referring to Yishmael ben Netanyah ben Ishama, who killed Gedalia when he thought the kingship would be, not kingship, the rulership given to them by Pavel was more befitting of him, as he was the son of the king, so he killed Gedaliah. And from this we know that the Tanakh was specific with regards to referring to him in his father and grandfather's name. We know that both his parents were evil, both his ancestors, his father and his grandfather. Amar Rav Nachman Malachi. Now we're going through different people's names from the period of the end of the first exile, beginning of the second temple period. And that period is a little bit confusing. We're not sure exactly what's going on in that period. 1 second. No, I'm not sure what she's destroying. I can't pause it as well. Sorry. Amar Rav Nachman Malachi ze Mordechai. Lam nikra shmo Malachi sham Mishneh lemelech. So we say, Rav Nachman says that Malachi, the Navi, is also Mordechai Yehudi. And that why do we therefore call him Malachi? Because he was the second in command, Malachi. He was the Melech. He was the second in command of Achashverosh. Or he's his helper, his viceroy. Meitvei. Baruch ben Neria, Usra ben Marsiah, ודניאל ומרדכי בלשן וחגי וזכר ומלאכי כולם נגנבו בשנת 2 לדריווש. Okay? Tivda. Now we have another teaching which says Baruch ben Neriah and Sarah ben Maaseiah and Daniel and Mordechai Bilshan. Mordechai Bilshan is known that because he spoke many languages, one of his other names. Chagai, Zechar, Malachi. All of these people were Nevi'im in the second year of Dariavesh's reign, the second Dariavesh, the son of Achashverosh. And from this we learn, if it mentions in one list Mordechai and Malachi in the same list as if they're different people, that means clearly that Rav Nachman, we can't accept his opinion, and actually there are two different people, and that's why the Gemara resolves it, or ends with the two of that. It's a rejection of Rav Nachman, and actually Malachi and Ezra can't be the same, and Malachi, and Mordechai can't be the same person. Now we have a different writer, Tanya. I'm Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, Malachi is Ezra, actually Malachi is Ezra. That's so fair. Malachi, Shmo, no, Malachi is a different guy. He's his own person, he's his own Navi, he's not Ezra instead. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. It makes sense, and Malachi is actually Ezra. Dichtiv ben Neviut Malachi Bagda, as is written in the prophecies of Malachi, Bagda Yudah has been treacherous. The Toiva Nesta Israel, and an abomination to be done within Israel, with Yerushalayim and within Yerushalayim. Ki Chilel Yudah Kodesh Hashem, because Am Israel or Yudah, which is the main tribe now of the returning Jews after the first exile, have desecrated the holy of Israel. What have they done? How have they done it? As the pasuk finishes, Asher Ahav Uval Bat Nechal, because they've loved and had relations with the daughter of foreign gods, meaning with non-Jews. That's what Malachi is giving a prophecy against, and therefore it makes sense. Malachi is Ezra, because Ezra's big campaign was against intermarriage. As we know, Uman Afrish Nashim Nachiyot, who was the one who campaigned against non-Jewish assimilation and intermarriage? Who was the one who asked them to divorce their wives and send them away? Ezra. Dichtiv, as it says in Ezra, Yud, Perak Yud, Pasuk Bet, V'yan Shechania ben Yechiel mebnei Elam v'yomer Ezra, and Shechania ben Yechiel from the children of Elam answered Ezra v'yomer Ezra, Anachu ma'alu be'Elokeinu nashim nochiyot. We have sinned against God and misused what was holy, and we remarried non-Jewish wives. And if Ezra, Sofer, and Malachi are giving similar reprimands against the nation of Israel, from this we learn that they are probably the same person. But not probably, they're the same person. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan. Arba Nashim Yefefiot Hayu Ba'olam. There were 4 beautiful women in the world: Sarah, Rachav, I mean, there's a different gears to change here. It's the order. Sarah, Avigail, Rachav, Vester, and most people read it the other way around because Rachav was earlier than Avigail. So Sarah, Rachav, Avigail, Vester. And those that say that Esther was green, like a hadass, like a myrtle, and even so, God calls Achashverosh to love her, but that means she's not objectively beautiful. Mafik Esther Umayel Vashti. If you hold that Esther was actually green and therefore she's not objectively beautiful, then we take out Esther from the list of the 4 beautiful women and bring in Vashti instead. Vashti's beauty what made her one of the most beautiful women in the world. Okay, now we're going to say how these 4 women caused men to at least think of doing averos, sinning with zunut, with illicit relations. Okay, Tanu Rabbanan, Rachav b'shma zinta, Yeh b'kola, Avigail b'schirata, Shaul, Micha bat Shaul b'riata. So now we're mentioning someone else. We're bringing someone else, we haven't mentioned Esther and Sarah, but we are mentioning other women as well. So Rachav caused people to think bad things by just saying her name. Yael by hearing her voice. Avigail by just remembering her. Amicha bat Shaul by seeing her. Am Rabbi Yitzchak kol omer Rachav miad nikri. Rabbi Yitzchak says anyone says Rachav twice immediately sees a seminal remission. Amale Rav Nachman ana amina Rachav lo ichpati. Rav Nachman says, I've said Rachav numerous times, and nothing's ever happened to me. The Gemara answers, Amale, Rabbi Yitzchak answered Rav Nachman, Ki kamina biyoda uva makir. When I said what I said, I meant those that knew her, and we're not in an age where we know what she looked like and who she was, and therefore it didn't happen to us. But back in the day, those who knew Rachav and said her name would have a seminal mission. The Gemara continues. We are now. Let me just look where we are in the Gemara on the daf. I think you can see the mouse, so I'll just bring it down. We are up here. Okay, Mordechai yada kol asher nasa. Okay, so moving on. Mordechai yada et kol asher nasa. Mordechai knew what had been done and the decree against the Jews. The continuation of the passage is V'etzeh b'toch ha'ir v'yizak za'aka gdola umara. He went out into the city and screamed a great scream. My Amar, what was he screaming out? Rav Amar gava Haman ma'achashverosh. Haman has become more evil than Achashverosh. That's what he's screaming. Meaning, Achashverosh was bad enough. Haman is even worse. Let's bring my daughter up, who's sitting right next to me. Come on. Goodbye. Hey. Okay, so Haman is a lot worse. The king of above has overcome the king of below. Meaning, if you understand the pshat is, or if you just read what it says, or translate what it says, it means the king of, meaning Akash Baruch Hu has overcome Achashverosh. Now, that's clearly not what's happening in that part of the story. Rather, this is Lashon Sagi Naor, a positive wording for something negative. So sometimes when Am Yisrael are being cursed in the Gemara, it says, instead of Am Yisrael, it says Sonehem Shel Yisrael, the haters of Israel. Even though it means Am Yisrael, so it's not written explicitly that Am Yisrael are cursed or something in some situations. So too here. Really, Mordechai is screaming out, the king of above has become, or the king of below is overcoming the king of above. Meaning Achashverosh is playing the game and overcoming Kodesh Baruch Hu. At least it would seem so. Whether he said that explicitly or whether he used Saginor is not clear, but the Gemara is saying it, at least in Lashon Saginor, in a positive way, so it doesn't seem bad. Okay? Now, Malka. She was shook. Esther was shook. She was very disturbed on what was going on. Now, it can also mean she was shuddering. She was shaking from what she saw. My batichal. What does it mean? Which could mean that she's like her body is like shaking and melting and stuff like that. That's how some of the Mepharshim explain it. Amarav she pilsanida, out of shock of what was happening and the fear, it caused her to menstruate and become nida. And we actually do know that the fear, biology, fear, and psychological state of mind can actually affect the nida if someone is her menstrual cycle, woman's menstrual cycle. Rabbi Yirmiyah Rabbi Yirmiyah says no, she needed the bathroom. She needed to go to the toilet because of such the shock. So she calls her assistant, the king's like messenger or the minister who looks after her. And the Gemara says like this: this Hatach, who was one of the eunuchs of the king, kind of thing. It's Daniel. And he was already important in a position of importance from the days of Belshazzar, and by Achashverosh was also appointed by Achashverosh to be the representative of Esther. And so why is he called Hatach? V'lama nikra shmo Hatach? She chatchu migduraton. In the days of Achashverosh, he was lowered from his position of power. And he was just placed as one of the assistants, but not one of the main ministers. Shmuel Amar, Shekod ve'malchut nechtachim al piv. No, actually the opposite, that all the king's decisions were decided by him. Or there was a discussion and he would be the one that would weigh in. And now, it says, Ladat mazeh v'amazeh. Or the full pasuk is, V'tika es elatach. 1 second. Ladat mazeh v'amazeh. 1 second over here. ותקרא אסתר להתך מסריסי המלך אשר העמיד לפניה. ציווה המלכה לדעת מה זה ומה זה. She calls סריסי המלך, להתך, one of the servants of the king, who Achashverosh himself had appointed, and asks him to go and ask Mordechai, what's going on? Why are you acting this way? So that's the passage. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak shachalo shema avu Yisrael al 5 chumshei Torah tichtiv b'hem mizeh u'mizeh hem ktuvim. She asks, meaning mazeh v'amazeh is actually reference to the Chumashim, and she's saying, are you saying that the reason that they deserve what's about to happen to them is because they transgressed the Torah, all the 5 chumshei Torah, because mazeh v'amazeh in the pasuk in the Megillah hints towards something in Sefer Shmot, which refers to the Luchot and the way that they were chiseled through Mizeh u'Mizeh Ketuvim. They are the same thing from both sides. They told Mordechai the words of Esther. Ihu lo azal gabei. They told, but the fact is Vayagidu and not Vayagid, it sounds like the Hatach himself didn't go. Lo azal gabei. Ihu lo azal gabei. Right, because Esther said she can't go into the king's palace. And he's gone to tell her that, but he himself doesn't go. Right? Esther says, I can't go into the king's palace without being invited first, as we know from the story. And it sounds like Daniel, the Hatach, didn't go himself to say, why not? Mikan, Shem Meshivim ala Kalkala. From this we learn, Derech Eretz, a way of the land, is that the Shaliach doesn't go back to one that sent him when he doesn't succeed in his shlichut. And therefore, the Hatach, Daniel, didn't go back to Mordechai, and therefore she sent a message with someone else. And now, Esther, to try and solve this problem, her not being, after Mordechai tries convincing her, she says to Mordechai, Lech knos kol Yudim, go and collect all the Jews who are in Shushan and do the fast for 3 days. Ad asher lo kadat, until the end of the pasuk, which says lo kadat is not that it's not what's called kadat. It's not the right thing. Kadat, like dati, it's not the way of the queen to go into the king without being invited first. Amar Abi Abba shelo kadat kol yom v'yom. It's not as her conduct as it was every day. Meaning, until now, in her marriage with Achashverosh, she's been acting differently. Until now, she's been keeping the Torah. Shebechol yom v'yom ad achshav. But honest, until now, I have been basically raped every single time. I didn't want to be together, and I never showed any interest. And it was rape because the king would have killed me otherwise. V'achshav, but so on. From now on in, I will have to come through wanting it. Meaning, not that I deep down want it, but me approaching the king gives the impression, which I'm only doing to save the Jewish people, gives the impression that I am interested in having relations, even though I'm married to Mordechai, according to the Midrash or the Agata, which said that they were married. Kasher avadati b'achshav baratzon. And now it will be as if I want it. Kasher avadati, and I will be lost. I will be lost. What's that referring to? Why twice? Why does it say I'll be lost? I'll be lost. Just as I was taken or lost from my father's house, I will also be lost from you as well. Meaning, I will now be prohibited to you. A woman who is raped can still, as long as she's not married to a Kohen, can still continue being married to her husband. But if at some point it becomes desire, the woman wants to have the relations, then no longer is she allowed to be continued to married to the husband. And therefore she's saying that she will now be lost from Mordechai. Mordechai does what she is asking for the fasting for 3 days. The first day of Pesach was the first day of the fast, and that means they actually didn't do Leila Seder that year because they were fasting. Shmuel Amar even Davar al Kuma Damaya. What does it mean in V'yavo? He passed, meaning the first rasha of Rav is they transgressed, as if they transgressed. What did they transgress? They transgressed another mitzvah. They didn't keep the mitzvah of Pesach because they were fasting instead, which is the correct thing to do because it was Koach Nefesh. They weren't punished for this. Shmuel says, what did he pass? What did he transgress? No, it's not from the word transgress. It's from the word lavo, to pass something. What did he pass? Al kuma damaya. He passed a lake or a big puddle, meaning he went to the other side of the river. There's a river in Shushan, and he crossed that river to bring the Jews from the other side of Shushan to fast together. And it was on the third day, Esther wore the clothing of king, or royal clothing. Now, it says, it should have said Big Day Malchut. Esther Big Day Malchut. It doesn't say clothes there. It says, and Esther wore kingship. Where it really should say Big Day Malchut. So why doesn't it? Amar Rabbi Elazar, Amar Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Elazar says in the name Rabbi Chanina, Melamed shelavshta ruach hakodesh. From this we learn that she was clothed in ruach hakodesh, in nevuah, prophecy. Tichtiv hachav tilbash, tichtiv hatam ruach lavsha et amasai. As it says here, v'tilbash, and another place it refers to lavsha in Divrei Yamim, ruach lavsha al amasai. That the spirit dressed, enveloped my body, and this is referring to the spirit of Nevuah, and so to Esther prophesied. That's how we know it Okay. Now, seeing as we already quoted Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Chanina, as I mentioned before in Gemara, sometimes the Gemara needs to get these ideas down, different stuff which is taught by different rabbis down, and they choose to go on tangents when they've already mentioned a rabbi in the name of another rabbi, and they get all the teachings out of that rabbi. To just finish with it so we know that we're not going to forget them, and they're written down. Never should the bracha of a simple guy be easy in your eyes, meaning not important. Even a bracha of a simple person is important. Two people who were blessed by simple people were blessed, and the brachas remained and were kept. Who are these people? David and Daniel, who were blessed by simple people. David Devarche Arvana. David is blessed by Arvana. How you will see, Arvana was the one who sold Harabait to David, so he could build the Beit Hamikdash. Dichtiv v'yoma Arvana el Hamelech, as Arvana said to the king. Now that pasuk is from Shmuel Bet Kaf Dalet Kaf Gimel. Shmuel Bet Kaf Dalet Kaf Gimel, and Hakon, and the whole pasuk is Hakon Natan Arvana Hamelech leMelech. Everything Arvana the king gave to the king. V'yomer Arvana el Hamelech Hashem Elokecha Yitzecha. He says, may the Lord your God desire you. That was his bracha, and his bracha was kept, as it says. Later, and God listened to the prayers of the land, and he stopped the plague. What is this plague? This is the plague after he counted Am Yisrael, and he listened to the prayers of Daniel of Arvana. Daniel is blessed by Daryavesh after he is thrown into the lion's den. Dichtiv Elahach di ant palachle petadira hu ishiz vinach. He says, the God that you have been serving with prayer forever and ever, who ishiz vinach, he will help you and it will save you. And that's in the end what happened. And he survived the lion's den. As we know, the lions basically laid down with Daniel and didn't bother him, and they threw other people in, and the lions would devour the people and break them into pieces before they even hit the floor. With Daniel, who was able to sit with the lions, and they were completely fine with him. Okay. Another teaching from Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Chanina in the name of Rabbi Chanina. Don't let the curse of a simple guy also be easy in your eyes. I mean, take that seriously as well. We know that Avimelech cursed Sarah, that she hid that she was married to Abraham, and that's why Avimelech kidnapped her. He pays her compensation for doing what he did, and calls it ksut enaim, the covering of the eyes, which sounds like it's kind of a name for compensation. However, it can also mean that you covering the eyes of blindness. And that curse existed and continued in the seed of Sarah, as we know. That Sarah's descendant Yitzchak, her only son, became blind as he got older. Rabbi Elazar says to Rabbi Chanina, come and see that the nature or the midot, the character traits or the abilities of God are not like those of man. You can't compare man's koach to that of Kodesh Baruch Hu, his strength to that of Kodesh Baruch Hu. Midat basar Adam shofet klera, man takes a ktera, a pot, in the beginning, and puts it on the stove. And then puts water in it. You can't put water and then make the pot be underneath it. You need a kli first. Because Baruch Hu noten mayim, kakach shofek terah. But with the Kodesh Baruch Hu, he's able to collect the water together before there's even a kli. As you know, in Yirmiyahu it says, as he put water in the Shemayim before there were even clouds. Because the end of that pasuk is, and then came the clouds. I mean, there was water in the Shemayim first, and then he brought the clouds. This is a very famous teaching. Anyone who says a teaching in the name of the one who said it brings redemption to the world. And actually, in another place, it says that someone who says a Dvar Torah not in the name of the one who says it is transgressing the prohibition of gezel, of stealing, because he's not giving credit to the one who actually said it. As we know from the Megillah, Esther says to the king in the name of Mordechai, the big ten of she doesn't take the credit, she tells him directly that Mordechai is the one who told her, Esther, about big time V'teresh. Okay. Sorry, the Shnema Tomer Esther Melech B'Shem Mordechai. Fine. Rabbi Elazar Amar Rabbi Chanina Tzadik Avad L'Dor Avad. When the tzaddik dies, there is damage, or it's a loss also for the generation. Why? Because there is no righteous person left to defend Am Yisrael or the nation from the suffering. Mashal Ladam Shavda Lo Margrit Kom Makom Shehi Margrit Shema Lo Avda Ela Levala. What? Right? Meaning there's mashal for someone who's lost a pearl. Anywhere where this pearl is found, it's still a pearl. It still remains chashuv. It doesn't rot. It's a pearl. And what has it been lost from? So it's only been lost from the owner, but the pearl is still there. The nimshal is that the death of a tzaddik is damaging for the generation and not for future generations. Meaning it's where it is, and that's where it's unique. Where the pearl is found, that's where it's having the effect on. When it's not even found there, meaning in a different generation, then it doesn't have the effect anymore. Okay, now we're going back to, we left the teachings of Rabbi Elazar in the name of Rabbi Chanina, and now we're moving back to the ideas of the Psukim, and we're going to go a bit more just so we finish the daf and go over to the next page. After Haman says to those who love him, his wife, how much he's been honored in the Suda of the king, first Suda that Esther was organizing. He says, none of this is worth anything, Haman says, if Mordechai is there sitting at the gate of the king. Meaning, how can I feel good if my arch enemy, Mordechai, is still there making me suffer? I'm Rabbi Elazar, I'm Rabbi Chanina. Now we're back to teachings Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Chanina, but in the name of Rabbi Chanina, but now back to the Megillah, not tangents. When he saw Mordechai at the gate, or is he just bothered by Achashverosh sitting at the gate, or is there something deeper? What's really annoying him? What's getting his goat, as the expression goes? What makes him not recognize the cover he's been getting? Rather, it's like Kedarav Chista, Tamar Chista, Ze Ba Beprozbuli, Ze Ba Beprozbuti. What's annoying him is that Mordechai is coming with a contract of wealth, and Haman is coming with a contract of poverty. Why? Because the Midrash says that Haman sold himself as an Eved to Mordechai, and everyone had forgotten about it. And since then, Haman has become the viceroy of the king. And as Haman is walking past, Mordechai is showing his contract of sale as a slave, that to teach him actually, to remind him to get his guilt, that he's actually a slave of Mordechai. And therefore, when Haman sees him at the gate, that's what's making him hate everything, because all this covered at the end is worth nothing if I'm a slave of Mordechai and he's not willing to drop it. Amar Papa v'kaule after the Mizban Betalme. And he was called, Haman was called because of the sale, the slave which was sold for bread. And why do we know this? Because the Midrash says that, or what was referring to with the bread, that both Haman and Mordechai were generals in Achashverosh's army, and Haman wasn't very good at it, and he ran out of food for his soldiers, and so he ran out of money as well, and he sold his himself into slavery to get bread to feed his army. None of this is worth anything. What does Zeh mean? What's he pointing at? Zeh, right? He's pointing not just at the honor that he got, but he had this very expensive stone around his neck, which was worth all of his wealth. He'd brought all his wealth into one stone. So he's pointing at the stone itself and says, Zeh lo shaveli, because really worth belongs to Mordechai, because anything that Eved owns is owned by his master. And then we saw the king, when he saw at the king's gate Mordechai, he points and says, this isn't worth anything to me. Okay.